Welcome to the Monday, March 29th, 2020 board meeting of MSAD 51 Board of Directors. We'll start the meeting with a call to order. Peter Bingham.
Here.
Kevin Desmond.
Here.
Margot Harrington.
Here.
Ann Maximovich.
Here.
Tyler McGinley here. Kate Perrin.
Here.
Mike Simmons.
Here.
Jennifer Stewart.
Here.
Mike Williams.
Here.
And Elias Leggett, Barr, and Madison Dalton, I think, will be joining us. Andy, who do we have for public comment this evening?
I only received one request for public comment, and it was me.
I'm sorry, and what?
The first public commenter is me, Andy Chateau, resident of Brunswick.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Andrew Chateau. I'm a resident of Brunswick. I'm also the technology support specialist for MSAD 51. And I noticed during the last meeting that there was a budget item that the committee decided not to move forward. That was for an additional technology support specialist for MSAD 51. And I would just like to encourage the board to, if it's not possible this year, then consider it for the next budget cycle. I don't know if you know this, but I'm the only dedicated support professional in MSAD 51. We have a small tech team, and everybody does a little bit of support, but everyone but me has other roles, and even I have a couple of other duties. I'm doing a school board meeting right now, so I know for a fact that at least at the high school, a lot of the teachers are not feeling very supported because we just don't have the personnel to be in the halls ready to answer something all the time. So and especially as we gain more and more students, we're a one-to-one school, it's going to be a bigger and bigger issue. So eventually I think you will have to hire someone, and I would like to encourage you to do it sooner rather than later. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, assuming there's no other public comment.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. We will move into our workshop for tonight, which is a line-by-line review of the budget. I would like to pass this over to Kevin or Scott to kick off this workshop.
Well, listen, I'll go because I think the rest of it's going to be Scott. So, and I'll stay out of his way. This really is a fantastic opportunity, everyone, to the way that Scott is able to break down expenditures across each of the different cost centers, cost codes, and address questions that you may have, I think is truly unique. Having been part of budget committees in different organizations, I think this approach, if you haven't been through it before, you will find this very easy to follow. When you get into the places where the committee weighed in on a number of different things, the finance committee weighed in on a number of different things, looking at where we're moving this year and into next year. Please know that there were a lot of hours put in, and certainly your fresh perspective and set of eyes on this continues to help us to move the process forward. With that said, Scott and Jeff, I'll kick back to you.
I can just say one thing before Scott gets going. Just thanking the Finance Committee for all their support, and with Scott, just working with Scott for months on this, getting the presentation that was presented at the last board meeting, and all the support that we've had in building this budget. I think this is a really responsible budget. Not that we don't always bring forth a responsible budget, but this is a budget that is very responsible in making sure that we have the resources we need to return to green in September, as well as have very little impact on the taxpayer. we're looking at around 1% in both towns at this point. At the end, after Scott has finished walking us through this, obviously we want to answer any questions, along the way, but also open up for discussion. If there's any other items, we have about a month before the board is being asked to adopt the budget, which is April 26th. So you have time to, kind of dive in deeper into the budget process, but we have a couple items that we'd also like to just throw out there, share them with the finance committee, and I think we've kind of gone back and forth, and it might be an opportunity just to have a greater discussion about a couple of items as well that haven't been landed quite yet. And we always make adjustments between the presentation and the actual adoption of the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Scott will kindly walk you through the budget process, or the whole budget, cost center and account lines.
All right, well, let's see how my technology skills are here to present. Let me just try this real quick. So can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. Okay, and it's large enough for everyone, I hope. So, our previous budget that we'd talked about when Jeff did his presentation, that budget was an increase of about 4.37%. And since we presented that, we had information come in on our health insurance, and we found that the greatest increase in health insurance under our existing plan will be 4.2%. So we were able to adjust the budget. That meant about $166,000 that we were able to remove from the district budget just based on that cost estimate. So we had budgeted 8%. It came in at 4.2, and so we were pleased with that result. So if we take a look at this particular document, sorry about that. This budget shows, this is a capture of the expenditures, the revenues, and the tax rate for both towns. So the revenues we've gone through previously, talking about state subsidy and miscellaneous revenue. Miscellaneous revenue is down $75,000, and that has to do more with tuition students that we aren't experiencing now, and also some of the additional use of facilities where we normally would collect funds. So we have an increase in our revenues of around $475,000. Then we get down into the expenditure side of the budget, and we see that there's 11 cost centers. This is 10 of them, but we have 11 cost centers in which we have to report to the state and how we have to organize our budget. So regular instruction is the first cost center, and that's pretty self-explanatory. And you'll see that particular area is up about $977,000, or about 5.5%. And that's inclusive of a 0.5 remote teacher, 2 FTE increase in teaching staff at MIW, a 0.2 art position. And then there's also some furniture in there for Mabel I. Wilson School for the modular classroom and setup of those rooms. In addition, Greeley Middle School 4-5. There's an additional FTE, 1 teacher, and also a 0.2 STEM teacher that's related to enrollment. And so all of these positions are related to enrollment. And then at Greeley Middle School 6-8, we also added 1 FTE teacher, which was, I believe, the 6th grade social studies position, Jeff. And at Greeley High School, we added 0.4 social studies position. And there's also an added educational technician for math and science support. So that's really the driving increases, along with really basic staff salary and benefit increases that make up regular instruction. Special education, about a $313,000 increase, and that's where we have the position that we've put forth in the budget for the assistant director, and there's also 1 additional educational technician. And later on, I'll talk more about the positions that we eliminated to fund that special ed assistant director position. It doesn't necessarily come out of special education. It comes out of the district office and some of the instruction cost lines. And then under Other instruction, that would be your athletics and your co-curriculars. That's up about $28,000 there, and that's really just, it's about 3.5%, and that's your coaching stipends and your co-curricular stipends. Under student and staff support, which is where technology, guidance, library, those types of areas fall, we have there a decrease of about $17,000, and it's a little deceptive because our technology leases, we paid off about $126,000 in leases at the end of our last fiscal year budget. And if you remember, the finance committee and the board made budget adjustments toward the end of the fiscal year and was actually financially prudent in paying off leases early that normally would have carried over into the next fiscal year. So we used our fund balance towards the end of the year to be able to pay off these leases and position us well coming into this fiscal year. In addition to that, there's software increases across the budget, and there's also $50,000 in MLTI devices that also fall in this cost center. Under system administration, there's a reduction. That's the central office and also the office of the superintendent and the board budget. That's down by about $21,000. And again, that's also inclusive of a position that's been eliminated in the central office to help fund that assistant director position. And also there is in that line, we've increased our legal line by $30,000. And I've spoken with you before about the budget actual around that and what was driving that. In school administration, it's up about $15,000 or 0.98%. That's your office of the principal, your secretaries, and everything that would fall in that area in each one of the buildings. And that would be up much higher than the 0.98% or just under 1%. But that's also an area that we had the 504 position that is housed here in the central office. But because it's supporting instruction, it was across the school's secretary lines. It was an administrative assistant position. And we had eliminated that, also increased some secretarial time at Mabel I. Wilson School, and also revised that position, the administrative assistant, into a 20-hour-a-week secretary position, which is a basic clerical support position. Transportation and buses, that's up about $167,000, and that's just what it says. It's transportation, which is about a 9.8% increase. This is the year that we take on the $160,000 lease with the town of Cumberland for the joint bus garage and public works facilities. And that's really what's driving the majority of that increase there. Facilities maintenance is up $214,000, and that has to do with the modular classroom addition, which is going on at Mabel I. Wilson School. In addition, we brought forth, there's a modular, smaller modular, which is down to the bus garage that was used as a break room. That now will come up to Greeley Middle School and be used as student pullout space or small instruction space. We also, so that's come out of there as well. And then the other thing we've got is our custodians. We've had a very difficult time maintaining part-time bus drivers. So as we've gone through the year, we've had to hire what's called a bus driver custodian. So in order to give somebody full-time work, in order to be able to keep people on staff, we've hired bus drivers with also custodial duties during the day, and that's also added some increase to the budget. But there's a retention problem there that we have in order not being able to keep part-time staff. In addition to that, we've got about an 18% increase in our building liability insurance. And there's some minor utilities updates that I did at Mabel I. Wilson School to accommodate the modular and also, the electric and the natural gas on the modular. There's also some additional time for maintenance overtime, snow removal, etc. We also have under debt service, we have declining debt service. That's a natural decline in principal and interest on our net debt service. So with all of those decreases and increases, our budget has ended up being about $1,593,962 increase, or 3.96%. And that's the difference. There is the $166,000 in health insurance that we provided. We then go down further and we'll see that the actual tax calculation in each town, there's a required mill rate that's set under essential programs and services of 7.9 mills that each community has to pay based on its property valuation. So the assessments are not based on the number of students in each community. It's based on valuation, which is a community's ability to pay on its property value. And then there's an additional local that we divide up, which is also based on a 3-year state average of property value. And we come up that our increase in assessment to both communities has gone up $687,000 in Cumberland, $332 in North Yarmouth. And respectively, it's 22 cents on the mill rate and 15 cents on the mill rate. Just over 1% in Cumberland, under 1% in North Yarmouth. And this, what this means for the average person looking at this is that it's $22 for every 100,000 of value on a home for what you would pay in property taxes. So if you took, $22 and multiplied it by 300,000, then you would come up with what you would pay in taxes for that particular year, in addition to support education. Same thing in North Yarmouth, $15 for every 100,000 of property value. So with all that being said, I don't know if anybody has any questions around this. I cannot see your hands, so I would just ask that you speak up, I guess.
Okay, Scott, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Just around long-term subs, that line, can you give us some kind of an idea of, right at this moment, how many faculty staff and support staff and everything that we have out on family, medical, personal, or any other type of leave, and basically how many FTEs you've got in your budget for next year, or some other rationale for this year. But I think it would be interesting because there's a lot of stuff being bandied about, and it would be good information as to what the body count is right now as we speak.
Yeah, Peter, I would have to call it up on the staff that are out on those pieces, but last I checked, I believed it was around 22 staff total. And that has to do with childcare and also, FMLA, which is the extension of that. Most of the, we had 4 staff who were out on ADA issues, and those staff are actually coming back. And they're coming back, some of them part-time, some of them full-time. In addition to that, we have 15 what we call bench subs in the district right now that are covering for those classroom positions and helping when, many of the staff are still working even though they're out, Peter. So it's not as though we're paying a bunch of staff to be out. They're working remotely, those who are out for childcare reasons. And also we have staff who are actually even live streaming into the classroom at the same time that there's a sub in the classroom. So people are working. In the current budget that I've presented here, there are no additional substitutes in this budget, Peter. We've got the regular substitute lines. The only thing that I carry is, in each school, I carry a long-term sub that has to do more with maternity and also other long-term sub issues that might come up during a fiscal year. Jeff and I have talked about using some of the ESSER funds that are coming out in order to deal with long-term substitutes if we have to. So I don't know if that answers your question, Peter.
Yeah, that's close enough.
Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So give me a moment here. I'll go out of this particular document and we will call up the general fund budget. Okay, so can everybody see that? I hope.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes,
hearing.
we
Okay.
can.
Great. Okay. So this is starting with the cost centers in each one of the schools, and you'll find that each one of the schools follows a pattern. So you'll go through and you'll see regular instruction, then you'll see, special education, then you'll see the library, then you'll see gifted and talented. So it kind of just rolls through a progression, and once you've gone through one school, then you kind of go through the next school a little bit easier, the next one a little bit easier when we go through all 4 of the buildings. So if we start and out to the left-hand side over here, each one of the account lines is numbered. So while it's got this long state number we have to follow in a descriptor, it's also got a line over here, which I'm going to reference as we go through the budget. And I'm going to just touch base on the major increases and decreases. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the smaller items. It's going to be just on the major increases. So if we take a look at line 1 and we come all the way over to here and we see 302,538 at Mabel I. Wilson School, that's indicative of the 0.5 remote teacher, the 0.2 art, and the 2 FTE teaching positions at Mabel I. Wilson School that I had mentioned earlier. The next increase would be down under the group health insurance at line 5, which is then an increase of 80,000. Of course, that has to do because we've added staff up above. That increase is, of course, higher than the 4.2. And then we have below that, we have the assistant, the ed techs, instructional assistant ed techs. And the health insurance for that one is related to just changes in staff. So that's page 1. So I don't know. Let me just scan down a little bit and give me just a moment here. Sorry, bear with me. This thing's scanning pretty quick on me here. Okay, then we come down to all of the supplies and equipment for the building as well. So on the next page here, and we see that there's employee travel, then there's instructional supplies, and this is up by about $6,800, and this is new setup for the modular. It also has to do with supplies for the new staff that are coming in. We then go down to books, and that would be the same thing. There's additional staff, and so we're looking to increase the book areas, which are the classroom libraries. And then under equipment, there's an increase of a little over $10,000, and that has to do with furniture and furnishings for the modulars. And there's also up in the supplies as well, there's some math materials as well. So that is that particular section. And we can just continue to go down through this. I don't know what's going to be the best way. Do you want me to try to stop at a cost center? Okay, so why don't we stop there at instruction?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so we'll stop there at instruction. Any questions in the instruction area? Okay. Okay, and there's no changes under the pre-K that we really need to look at. There's now we get into the area which is regular classroom placement, which is where we start special education, which starts on line 46. And excuse me a minute here. And so this is regular classroom placement. And the thing to note in special education is you'll see in a variety of areas, you'll see like this is up, close to $30,000 for an educational technician. But what you're going to see as we go across the entire budget for each one of the buildings, you'll notice that special ed techs go up and they go down. And this is the ed tech shuffle every year based on the student need in each building. The administrators get together along with Julie, and they determine where the needs are for the educational technicians based on student needs. So the ed techs get redeployed. So you'll see this one's up here, but you'll also see later in the budget, you'll see that staff increases are down in other areas of the budget. Okay. Nothing. I don't have anything through this area. Then we get into the resource class placement, which is also part of special education. You'll see here, again, there's an increase here, special education health insurance. And again, that has to do with just the increase plus changes in staff. We have a number of openings in special education for educational technicians right now. And so there's a number of changes that have taken place. And then there's nothing through this area that I would reference either, which is still special ed. So let me just continue. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has any questions around special ed at Mabel I. Wilson School.
I
Okay.
do not, Scott.
Okay, great. So I'll just continue on.
Can I just ask a question about, it's probably more to Jeff than you. Is there in this budget additional support for summer school or added supports for, I don't know, people keep talking about what's being missed this year, and some schools are adding in programming to support that. Is that going to show up in this?
Yeah, so the summer school, we are running a summer school program this year, like we always do. Program Camp Friendship for special education, which will be in person this year, but we always budget for that. We have credit recovery that we offer each summer at the high school in reading and math. We'll be providing that again, as we always do. We're not providing any other summer school this year, at least at this point. Part of it is, and there's a lot of kind of discussion about the importance of summer school being in FY22 or the summer of 22. We think most students, I think, after a typical year next year, will have made the academic gains where we expect them by the end of the school year. It'll be far more beneficial for them to have that extra support if they need it after a typical year of school. And that is something that you'll actually see in a lot of districts are planning it that way. So we're not planning to beef up our summer programming. If we're going to beef anything up, it would be after school programming. We do offer after school programming from grades 4 to basically 4 to 12, some sort of after school support for kids. And we've been doing that all along, except for this year with COVID. So the budget does reflect the fact that we have that money in there for that purpose. The Sr3 funds that we'll be receiving, which is almost 400,000, some of that is being encouraged to be used for after-school programming and summer programming. So I think that's something that we'll want to look at, the Sr3 funds for those purposes if we want to expand what we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, so line 97, and this is where we get into 4,900, which is gifted and talented. You'll see that gifted and talented is up at both Mabel I. Wilson School, and it's also up at 4.5, but it's also down at Greeley Middle School. And that just has to do with the shifting of the FTE of staff. There's no more additional staff. It's just the allocation of those staff to the buildings. And then, please bear with me. Okay. And then social worker salaries under line 108. That's an area that I need to take a look at. I was just looking at that one today, and I need to just investigate that one a little bit further and find why that one's down. Then we'll go down to line student guidance, nothing there. Supplies. Then we're going to get more down into more of our special education services. So, excuse me a moment here. So we get down into the psychological area, which is 2,800, which doesn't have any major changes. And then we're down to speech pathology. And if you notice that one, you'll see that in the speech area, just a second here, that is up slightly, but it's also part of the reallocation that we've got going on between cost centers. So while you'll see that one up, you'll see other areas adjusted. We also have under occupational therapy, which is further down. This is our OT services and special education. You'll see that this one is also down, but that it's down at Mabel I. Wilson School, but you'll see it also down at Greeley High School, but up at Greeley Middle School. So it's the deployment of staff based on student needs. So, all right, and then there is the extended year services that we have in the district, and this is Camp Friendship. And we have in the area of teacher salaries, that's really becoming just some additional staffing, because I'm not quite sure what we're going to need out there this year when we start. But there is a little bit of overlap between the 2 fiscal years, and also an instructional assistant time. I've added a little bit more there, just that's budget to actual. So that's what we've added in the extended year services. And I think, Margot, that probably gets to some of your question, even though it's in special ed. That's some of the additional time that we're looking at. Instructional staff training just happens to be professional development for the district staff. And then we get into the area of library under Mabel I. Wilson School, and we basically have a decrease there in the health insurance, and that has to do with staff attrition. And then the one that has a number of changes in it is instruction-related technology. And the area there that has the most of the changes is under purchase professional services. That has to do with our systems engineering support contract. We have a number of devices and increased network, so we obviously have some purchase professional services around that. We also have an increase in the supplies of $6,750, which is really more related, as I talked to Dirk, it has more to do with a lot of the batteries and a lot of the incidentals that we need for much of the technology that we've added to the district. The technology software, that has to do with our new website. Jeff had mentioned that in his presentation, that there's now a website service that we had to enter into that we didn't have to pay for before. And then I had mentioned that the finance committee and the board had strategically paid off leases in the previous fiscal year in order to position yourselves as you move forward. And that fiscal planning has allowed that technology area to be reduced. So are there any questions in technology?
Scott, I hate to be the one to ask the question, but just if you could clarify on the purchase professional services with systems engineering, is that part of the funds that we received, or is this something else?
No, this is outside of that. This is basically maintaining the network.
Okay.
And repairs to the network, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we then get down to the school administration, which I had mentioned earlier, Office of the Principal, which is where the principal and the secretaries are located in the budget. And there is currently about a $4,300 increase in the secretary line, and there's also an increase in the retirement area as well, which is down here, because we've now moved one of the secretaries to full-time. It's the only building that doesn't have 2 full-time secretaries in it. And based on the enrollment, we've made that adjustment. And that was also in the presentation that we had provided you. Okay. Operation and maintenance of plant. So this is our utility area, and you'll see here that the and portable area, the portable classroom lease, of about $42,000. That's the 2 classrooms that are being sectioned into the existing modular. And so that'll increase our overall lease on that building by about $42,000. We then have the property insurance, which I mentioned earlier. There was a building and property went up 18%. And telephone of $2,400, that's just a budget to actual based on usage. Natural gas, that's also adjusted based on usage. And we have a lot of windows and a lot of things that are open during this pandemic. And so, you know, we're definitely pumping more heat through the buildings than we did before. And we're also, all the air handlers and the preheating units are all wide open to bring as much fresh air into the building as we can. So I would anticipate some increase in that area, also with a bit of an increase with the modular class, 2 modular classrooms that we added. And that also will pertain to also the estimate of around $6,000 on electricity. So I don't know, does anybody have any questions on the utility area?
I had one question. So I understand natural gas being used then for the heating element, but what bottled gas, what is that used for?
Bottled gas is used for the kitchen.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
All right, so we did have bottled gas for the modulars that were behind there before, but when we added the big modular classroom, the 8-room cluster, we at that point what we did is we converted everything over to natural gas and tapped into the natural gas to the building.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Operation of building as well. Excuse me. Whoa, that went a little too quick. Okay. So this is where we get into the custodial salaries, and you'll see we're up about $31,000 here. And much of that has to do with us having to add additional time for snow removal, but also utilization of the bus drivers to clean the facilities along with their bus runs. And as I mentioned, it's difficult to maintain staff if you don't have full-time work for them. Custodial group health insurance, with changes in staff and reallocation with staff comes additional health insurance costs. If somebody leaves, others come in and take health insurance. The retirement would be the same thing. Under the participating local district or PLT of Maine Peers, we have some staff members that have joined us who are part of the PLD. And so we have to contribute to that.
So Scott, this maintenance thing seems to be, and I realize they've got to, we've got to up the cleaning, but this thing just seems to have suffered a creep over the years. And I understand sometimes we don't have a lot of control over the health insurance thing, but this is starting to become a little monster in itself.
Well, it's as I said, Peter, it's hard to get the students to school without bus drivers, and I've had to create full-time work and create positions which are called bus driver custodians, which is what most school districts do. They don't just have part-time bus drivers. They use a variety of options to do that. And, the cost of attrition of a bus driver would be much greater than the $31,000 budgeted there.
I get it, but it just seems like there's there's been a creep, and also we're spending as much time shutting down the system when these folks are out that we do with our staff. But that's just an aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what that means, Peter. Our custodians work right through, and we have the bus drivers. When we have a shutdown, the bus drivers are actually cleaning in the buildings now.
Yeah.
So during the year, those staff are actually working, unless, of course, they're quarantined because of a COVID exposure.
Yeah.
But you'll also find in other areas of the budget, the custodial staff is down at some other areas of the budget. We'll see that as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Just some of it's just a little frustration that this just seems to be a little monster that grows.
Okay.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Do we anticipate needing? I see the custodial supplies line is flat.
Mm-hmm.
Notwithstanding, this year we were able to get past a lot of that with federal funds. Do we anticipate needing more money to keep up with that going into next year?
Yeah, actually, you'll see we budgeted it flat, but you'll also see as we get into the maintenance area, which is cost center 90 later on, not just the custodial area, we actually have a little over $30,000 budgeted for COVID supplies and equipment. So we've kind of taken that into account based on what we've experienced.
Gotcha.
So there's money in the budget later on for that.
Perfect.
Okay. So we'll continue down, and that is where we end up with Mabel I. Wilson School. So a little over 601,000 or 6.8%. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions about Mabel I. Wilson School or comments, and then we can move on to Greeley Middle School 4-5 if there are none. Okay. So Greeley Middle School 4-5. Again, you'll see the same format as Mabel I. Wilson School. We start with instruction, and you'll find that here we're up about 7.7% or $113,000. That has to do with adding one FTE teacher for 4-5, and there's also a 0.2 STEM teacher, and both of those positions are enrollment related. Instructional assistant, the decrease there just has to do with changes in staff. And then we go further down to line 237, which you see there, that's teacher group health insurance. And again, the increase was 4.2%. We're very close. Bear with me here. So I'll then go down. There's nothing else much through here. So we'll go to line 258. Again, we get into instructional supplies, and part of this increase here, this 4,286 or 11% on line 258. Again, some of that has to do with the new teacher, but there's also literacy materials there and math materials in that line, basically with a focus on literacy and math. And there was there actually, if I recall, Jeff, and you might know this, I believe there was actually a group at 4-5 that actually did a review of these materials, and now we're actually buying the materials for literacy and math.
Yeah, it actually was the literacy team, and it was a K through 12 team, and they spent about 1.5 years reviewing the literacy program as part of our strategic plan, and we're just now catching up with those recommendations that have come out of that team that ended their work last year.
Okay.
So that's what we're seeing. We started buying those materials that were recommended last year, and we're continuing to buy them this year.
Yeah. Okay. And then it would be the same thing around, the $750 is increasing the classroom library for them. And then bear with me for a minute here. And then it's the same thing. The equipment has to do with room dividers in the building to help out with the spacing of staff and the use of space. So those would be room dividers. So anything under regular instruction at this point that anybody would have any questions on or comments?
I have a quick question, Scott, that's just general across each cost center.
Sure.
Are there plans to purchase more singular desks versus the table model that we typically use in an MSAD 51 classroom for next year?
I don't currently have a lot of funds budgeted. There's actually nothing in here for furniture other than Mabel I. Wilson School.
Okay.
So we're looking to use what we have on hand, and much of the equipment that's being purchased now. For instance, Sally we just bought some desks out of this fiscal year for MIW, and the desk actually become tables.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so wasn't that what we were talking about, Jeff, that they actually can be sectioned together, that they aren't like a regular desk that you would just sit at?
Yeah, we just bought, because you're right, at the elementary level, Kate, obviously we use a lot of tables for kids, and we had to put those into storage. So we did just buy 2 grades worth of single desks. And like Scott said, they're a special kind of desk that you can put together, and they can make tables as well. So they can be used both ways long term for good use of money, and we can use them going into the future. If we need to still do some sort of distancing, as a precaution or whatever, we can do that with a full classroom of students.
That sounds great. Thanks. I just wanted to
Sure.
check in.
So then we get down into special education again, and this is regular classroom placement for special ed. And we have the underneath the instructional assistants. You'll remember I talked about some areas are up, some areas are down. But if we look at all of the special ed assistants across the district in the entire cost center, there's only one increase, which really happens up to the high school for a change in legislation. So in ruling, and it's the one that we talked about at the presentation that Jeff had done. But again, you're going to see ups and downs for the instructional assistants or the ed techs, depending on where they're deployed for student need. Okay. With me, 283. Just a second, I want to go to 283. So again, here you see a small change here based on staffing on line 283. Then we can continue down to gifted and talented. Okay, GT. And again, if you remember, there was approximately this size increase at Mabel I. Wilson School, but then you'll see the decrease as we go down at Greeley Middle School, 6-8. Any questions as we've gone through on gifted and talented and special ed? Okay. All right. And then extracurricular and co-curricular. So this has to do with activity stipends for co-curricular. There's no major increases or changes there. Then we get into the social worker salaries. And again, no changes there to speak of. Then we get into guidance services. And again, pretty flat under guidance. Psychological services, which are our psych people, again, pretty flat there as well. So there aren't a lot of tremendous changes across the budget when you look at the whole. Speech, again, you'll see under speech, you'll see that there's some decreases, but also you'll see like this is down, but you'll also see an increase at the high school. And again, that's the allocation of staff based on the student need and IEP needs. So I'm just going to continue here. So, okay. So again, through the rest of this part of the budget, there really aren't much changes down through audiology or physical therapy services. Extended year services, again, is Camp Friendship. And again, that's flat. That's the program in the summertime. Staff training, again, professional development is flat. Library and media, again, is pretty flat there in 4.5. The librarian is accounted for under 6.8, but we do break out some of the cost into 4.5. Instruction-related technology, again, there isn't a lot of change in this area until you get down to the purchase professional services again, which is the distribution of the cost of systems engineering, et cetera. And then technology repairs and maintenance is pretty flat for this area. Supplies, again, are up, and that has to do with devices and batteries and the number of devices that we have on hand now. Software is up. Again, we've got a website that we are now having to pay for that we didn't have to pay for before. And let's see. And then again, we see under the technology related hardware, again, in the last fiscal year, through a budget transfer, you prudently paid off leases ahead of time to position yourselves going into this fiscal year. Any questions on any of those so far? Okay. So you can see how this keeps mirroring itself as we go through all of the different schools. Again, this area here, we have an out of district placement that we budgeted for, and that's under private tuition if students need to be placed outside the district.
Scott,
Yes.
can I ask a question about that? I see that
Yes.
we have 40,000 here, and there's 80,000 also budgeted, I think at the high school level.
Correct.
And it's 0 for 2 years ago. I thought that we budgeted some amount last year, but I didn't see that it was in the previous budget. So how much currently is the school paying on this? And do we expect that we're going to have to pay, $120,000 for outside tuition, or is it really a safety net?
No, it's not a safety net. This is an anticipated need. The safety net, and without getting into the individual students involved, but the safety net comes in that we have a contingency in special education for just that situation if we do have another unanticipated need or another out of district. And you'll find that we actually reduced this amount. It was actually more than that in the previous fiscal year. And we actually reduced it down to just these two that you just mentioned, Jennifer.
And is 40,000, so how much do we, I guess we don't have to get into the details. It just seems high to me. And you know those numbers better than I do,
Sure.
but on a principals agreement, when we bring kids in, is this the same amount that we're getting in for someone?
No, this is a different situation. This is not tuitioning somebody to another school district. This is a special placement at a private.
Okay. And that's the same with the high school amounts that we're
Correct.
seeing.
That's the same with the high school amount. And I certainly can, do something a little bit deeper. We can talk to Julie about this and do something a little bit
fine.
deeper.
It's just to kind of.
But it's really, an out of district placement isn't about placing a student at another school district.
Okay.
Scott, a dumb question on that. I think the previous time that I was on the board, that we actually had a situation where it was cheaper for us to hire a full-time aide, that we actually save money versus the out-of-state tuition. But I would assume on this, each situation is different, and some you couldn't do that. But I do remember one year we actually hired a aide and saved ourselves about $30,000 on a outside thing. But that's probably wishful thinking.
Yeah. There are times that we're able to do that, Peter, and Julie is a big proponent of inclusion, and students may be in the district, but there are times that we can't do that and it requires an out of district placement.
Understood.
Yeah, right now, Peter, Julie has been keeping students in their programs. We haven't been sending students out of the district. However, we do have, like Scott said, at least one anticipated need for next year. And it just, these are student specific needs that we're anticipating based on an IEP decision. So as we know those, we try to budget for them. Of course, it's not an exact science. Sometimes we get a student that we didn't know about, but we have largely had students stay in our district. We don't, very rarely have we sent students out. Currently we have none out. But we anticipate next year that will change a little bit.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then we get into the area of school administration, which again is which is the area of the principal and assistant principal, and also the secretary salary area. So this decrease in the secretary line, and also in the health insurance around that. If you remember, I mentioned a 504 position that we had. While it might have been housed here in our office, it also, it was charged to the schools because it was 504 and not special education or central office. So it was actually charged there. So this is the net effect of salary increases and the reduction of a position. Okay. And then again, everything pretty much flat in the office of the principal and school administration. This particular line right here is an error. This $200 for field trips. PTO funds field trips at the elementary level, so we'll be changing this and taking this out. So that was Greeley Middle School 4-5, and I don't know if anybody has any further questions there. How am I doing on time? Are we moving okay?
You're doing well.
All right, good. Okay, so now we're at Greeley Middle School 6-8. And again, we follow the same format. We're in instruction. So if we get to line 419, we'll see that we're up about $78,000 there. That has to do with, it would be higher than that normally because we've added a staff member there. We actually added back in the 6th grade social studies position. However, there was also some retirements and changes in staff that kept that line at 2.68 because of the people that were hired in place of those that retired and through that attrition. Instructional assistant is relatively the same. And then, of course, the health insurance is a little bit of an increase because of the staff, but very close to the 4.2 that we had talked about earlier. Excuse me, bear with me for a minute. Okay. So we continue down through instruction and, sorry, let me just get my bearings here. Okay. There we go. All right. And on this particular line here, there's a $2,000 increase in the purchase professional services, and that has to do with our interpreter service and translation services. When we have things that happen like in student conferences, et cetera, we need to have interpreters on hand. And that is the instruction area. Does anybody have any questions on Greeley Middle School instruction, regular instruction? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the area of special education. Again, you'll see an increase in the ed tech line on 449, but you're going to see some decreases as we go forward into the other areas. So as you see here, large decrease in the ed tech line, which is the differential on those that we've added in the other areas. And here is the health insurance piece, which had increased in other areas, but decreased at the middle school. So you can kind of see how it's up and down in the various areas depending on student need. Okay. And we'll just continue to, this is the out-of-district placements. It's down because we are not anticipating a student need here. I think that gets to what you were talking about, Jennifer. And then we can continue to gifted and talented. And again, this is the decrease at the middle school that I mentioned, but then there's also corresponding increases at 4-5 and Mabel I. Wilson School. Co-curricular and extracurricular. Again, that's activity stipends, and we budgeted an increase in those areas just based on the fact we haven't adjusted those in a while. And then game administration salary. So now we're in the area of athletics. And again, these are the athletic stipends with an increase to them, and also game administration salaries, which are all the refs and those types of activities. For paying the referees. Then we come down further. There's no other real changes in athletics. It's all pretty much flat other than a basic salary increase in those other two areas.
Scott,
Any questions before I go further?
I have a question. In the stipend department, can you
Yes.
speak? Can you or Jeff speak to if there is a theater position put back in for next year?
The theater position that we have, there is a theater stipend for both the middle school and the high school.
Mm-hmm.
There is no theater teaching position, so we haven't taken anything out, but there is no theater director or position for a theater director.
Okay, so it's still a stipend position.
Correct.
At both schools. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and we then move further down, and we get to this area here, the specialist social worker. Again, this is the overflow from our local entitlement grant. We have to pay the benefits out of the general fund, but can pay the salary. And this is a little bit of an overflow of the salary that's above and beyond the local entitlement grant. So the majority of the position comes out of local entitlement, but there's a small piece we have to pick up in the general fund. Guidance, same thing. There isn't anything really to speak of there that's of any increase. Student psychological services, again, fairly flat, other than, you know, some of the supplies are down. And again, the supplies are all based on student need and testing. Speech, relatively flat here. And then OT services, if you remember, they were down in other areas, but it's up here for occupational therapy. Audiology contracted services is down just based on budget to actual. Physical therapy, there's no other issues to really discuss there. There's some equipment that's needed for student needs and IEP needs, so we've budgeted $3,000 for physical therapy equipment. And this again is the extended year services or Camp Friendship, and again that's relatively flat, other than I've put some additional funds in there to basically look at, you know, previous year and other years around what we've used for educational technicians in that program. Professional development, no increase there. And I don't know. So I'll stop there for a minute till I talk about the library. Does anybody have any questions on what we discussed so far at the middle school? Okay. The library, we continue down through that. There's not, again, just minor increases, salary increases at the library. We again get into our technology area. I'm just going to jump down to here again, the purchase professional service area, systems engineering again. And so you're kind of seeing the, you know, the track of that across the district cost centers of the schools. Again, the supply area, same thing we talked about earlier in the budget. The software again has to do with, you know, additional software across the district. Plus it has to do with the web page. Technology related hardware. So this line should be up about $50,000. If you remember, Jeff had the MLTI in the presentation that he did of $50,000. However, we did pay off, again, we had positioned ourselves well because we'd paid off leases in the previous fiscal year. So we're only up $21,000 in this line instead of being up $50,000. Any questions on technology again? Pretty much a pattern across the district you can see in the various schools. Here's the other out-of-district placement, the private tuition that we have. And then we get into the office of the principal. And we have this decrease again is related to the position that we eliminated and the net of, you know, increased salaries for secretaries in the middle school. So it's the net of that. And in addition, we added the 20-hour-a-week secretary position in the central office. So you've got the addition of a 20-hour-a-week secretary, the decrease of the 504 position, and then the increase in salaries for the secretaries, and all of that nets out to be that roughly $2,000 number. Okay. Operation and maintenance of plant. Again, this is in the facilities. So we have, if you look, the portable classroom lease. We currently have a modular building, portable, which is down to the bus garage, which we're going to be pulling from the bus garage and putting it up to the middle school because of space needs. And and I'd mentioned that in the cost center breakdown that we were looking at earlier. So we've moved the cost of that portable classroom to the middle school because that's where we're going to locate it for small classroom space, is my understanding right now. Could be used for specialists, but I believe it's going to be used for small classroom space. Again, the 18% increase in liability, property and liability insurance, and then nothing else around the energy lines. And again, here we see that while this is an increase of 43,000, you're going to see a corresponding decrease at the high school. So you'll see an increase here, but you'll see a decrease at the high school. And that just has to do where staff are now located. And field trips, same. All the other pieces around this, slight increase in athletic transportation based on, fuel and salaries. And that is pretty much everything to do with Greeley Middle School, up about $213,000 or 2.5%. So are there any questions on the middle school at this point?
Scott?
Yes.
Remind me again, the property and casualty insurance, that's run through main school management, or where is that?
Yeah, it's through main school management, and they actually competitively bid.
Each year?
Yeah, they do bid. If I believe it's each year, and they go out to bid for their insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's how we meet the competitive bidding requirement on that. It's every 1 or 2 years. I'd have to check on that, Kevin. Yes, I had another question.
Yep. If we move the portable, won't that incur some operational cost for the heat and electricity?
Well, I took a look at the budget to actual around the heat, and I think we're okay there in the electricity.
Okay.
I looked at it, and I looked at what the actual usage was over about a 4-year period, and I think we'll be okay there, Margot.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll continue down, and we'll go to the Greeley High School, which is 912. So at Greeley High School, again, we start at regular instruction. And regular instruction, the teacher line is up $264,000. And that has to do with teachers that are making steps and salary increases. But it also has to do with the addition of, hang on here, a 0.4 social studies position in that line. And then the instructional assistant line has to do with the addition of an educational technician. And I believe that's for math and science support at the high school. Okay. Come down to the other areas under instruction, and again, instructional supplies. That is an increase, and that's we're adding the 0.4 social studies, but that's also kind of a look at the budget to actual on supplies. Books, that's a changing out of some of the texts that are at the high school, part of the replacement plan. And then also you'll see under the equipment line that's down $54,000 because of a furniture lease that we had paid off. I also noticed that this number here, which is 71,000, should come down by another 37,000. So this 71,000 number is an error because we actually paid off 2 furniture leases, preempting that in the previous fiscal year. So this number down would be greater. So there's basically $37,000 more here than what's actually needed. So that's an adjustment that we would have to make to the budget or talk about if that's something we would want to reallocate. So I'll stop right there under instruction. Does that make sense, what we explained there? Okay. And again, these types of things, we catch these as we review the budget. I mean, I was catching things as early as this morning as we were going through this. Line by line. Sorry. Let's catch this again. Okay. All right, then we get into special education again. Again, we saw a lot of increases in the special ed side of things, but now we're seeing decreases in the educational technician line. This line would be down even further, but we also added the educational technician for the change in legislation that we have, the age change on legislation. And we come down here, and again, the redeployment of ed techs again shows an increase here. So when you net out all of the educational technician lines, there's only one additional educational technician in the budget for special education. Okay, nothing in these areas. Again, extracurricular or co-curricular, same thing, modest increase. Athletics, again, modest increase around the stipends. Everything else is pretty much flat. Other than leasing and rental, I did put some additional funds in there towards ice time for hockey. Social workers, again, nothing, pretty much flat. So you can see much of this budget is fairly flat compared to the previous year. Guidance counselor, nothing there either. Psych services, roughly the same. Again, this is where we get into some of the reallocation that we talked about earlier, this on line 784. Here's where you see the OT, if you remember. We were up in the other, I had mentioned we were up in two of the other schools, and again, we're down here at the high school. That's the differential. So while we might be up previously, we're down here as we come to the high school. Again, physical therapy, flat. Extended year programs, flat. That's the Camp Friendship. Instructional staff training, again, flat. Library area, again, let's see. So in the library, we had a change of staff this year. Somebody with more experience is working in that position now. So that's why you're seeing the $6,000 increase here in the library ed tech. Technology. Again, we're seeing the cost increases that we saw in the other buildings. And then we also have at this level here, we have the a lease that was paid off in the previous year. So that's all part of that $127,000 in leases that we actually paid off, which actually the board had positioned themselves very much in a great prospect of coming into this new fiscal year. Athletics at the high school, flat. Office of the principal. Again, this decrease in the secretary line is the net of eliminating the 504 administrative assistant position, but also some increase in the secretary salary line for staff salary increases. And that's the school administration area. Building and property and casualty insurance, again, the increase there that we've experienced. Telephone of 662 on line 85, that's a budget to actual adjustment. Operation of buildings. So Peter, if you recall earlier, I mentioned that there were some sizable decreases at the high school, even though there might have been some increases at the other buildings. So here's, you can see how staff has been redeployed from the high school to other buildings.
Got it.
Okay. And Again, field trips, modest increase around fuel, etc. I'm looking at this line right now. I thought that might be slightly high, so I'm actually reviewing that with Rachel in transportation right now. So that may be an adjustment that we make. Same thing for transportation and the extracurricular and so forth. These numbers seem slightly high to me, so I want to be able to double check all those, and I'm working with Rachel around those trips and being able to track those and get a little bit of better idea, because obviously in 1920, towards the end of the year, we didn't have a lot of transportation. And so that's the high school. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. So the high school's up a little over 3% or 333,000. Any questions on the high school? Okay, we'll continue on. We're making great progress. That's the 4 schools, which all followed a certain pattern of how we have to establish our count structure under Department of Education guidelines. And all of these cost centers get uploaded on a quarterly basis to the state. So we have to upload our financials quarterly along with a year-end upload to the Department of Education. And that's why they have to follow this format and that account structure format. We get asked that sometimes, why do we format the budget the way we do? The district carries a $438,000 contingency. And again, that's for unanticipated needs through the district. Could be through the course of a fiscal year. One of the things we do is if we have these funds remaining as we get, or a portion of these funds toward the end of the fiscal year, we look to do things much like pay off leases, invest in our capital reserve funds, which is very appropriate as we go forward to deal with facilities. So we carry that, but we also then use it appropriately to help pay down things or build reserves. And on a $42 million budget, a little over 41 million now, 438 isn't a lot. We then get into some of the district-wide cost centers. So we have the nursing area, which is the student health services. This does not have the nurse in it that we are looking to hire, the additional nurse that we're adding. The additional nurse is going to come out of the ESSER funds that Jeff had talked about before. However, we can't put the benefits into that into there, so I have to carry the benefits in the general fund. So that's why you're seeing an increase here, but not necessarily the increase in the salary line. Improvement of instruction. This is the position that's located in the central office, but these are all of the stipends that are affiliated for mentors that are paid out of this office, and also department head stipends, etc. And we've done a slight increase to those. This area also carries some of our district-wide professional development funds, which is further down here towards, these lines. Okay, down, 941 and 939. Again, those areas are flat. So much of this budget is flat. We then get into the Board of Education. And so here's where we have, if we look here, contracted services, this is our equity work. We were spending $10,000 and we now are spending to USM I believe it's just under $5,000 or close to $5,000 with USM. Again, because of our experience with legal fees this year and previous fiscal year, we have increased our legal line to accommodate for that. And dues and fees of about $1,000. That has to do with the fees around main school management fees and superintendent fees for belonging to the Superintendents Association.
Scott,
Yes, go ahead.
the legal fee increase is pretty much what has been paid to date this year.
I took a look at what's been paid to date, and we're over year to date. And so we've looked at what we've spent this year so far.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty much where we've headed, with some additional based on what's probably going to be utilized the rest of the year. If you recall, I talked at one of the meetings that we had actually anticipated or dealt with about $30,000 in additional legal fees that we hadn't budgeted for.
Yeah.
Okay, due to circumstances we were experiencing this year.
Thank you.
Okay. So, so we can continue down through, that was the improvement instruction area, board of directors, and then we're in the superintendent's office. Everything there is fairly flat. We then get into special area administration. So this is special ed office, and you'll see that this number here is made up of about 104 of the assistant director position. And that's where that is located at, even though it was funded by the elimination of a central office position and a position that was broken off across the schools. You'll see here is where the, as we continue down, here's the administrative assistant position that was eliminated in the central office, which led towards a good chunk of the funding towards the other position, along with the 504 position that was eliminated. So that's pretty much that. This one here, again, is dues and fees. That has to do with Association of School Business Officials and Maine Superintendents Association. I believe that's what those two are. So that's our office, and everything else is fairly flat. So then we get into maintenance of buildings. So before I go any further, are there any other questions on the district wide lines or the district, you know, the board, central office, you know, special education? Yes.
I have just a couple just to kind of to revisit. One being, if you could just explain again how you treat food service and how that shows up.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then my other question would be is, I guess it's small, but how athletic fees that students and families pay in, where that shows up, is that in
Sure.
miscellaneous income?
No, that does not show up. The money that we collect comes to anywhere between, I believe, $78,000, $80,000 that we collect in athletic fees. And those funds are collected and put into a separate fund outside of the general operating account. And then those funds are used for, you know, equipment, uniforms, et cetera, in athletics. So those, so that's how those funds are treated outside of this. So they don't show up as miscellaneous income. They show up in a separate fund and are collected. And then what was your second question, Jennifer? I'm sorry.
How food service is
Sure.
treated in our district and how that kind of.
Sure. If you noticed earlier, I talked about that the district's contingency and fund balance that we try to build each year based on, you know, if we have funds that are remaining at the end of the year. Our food service program right now is running about a $200,000 deficit, and we anticipate paying that deficit off at the end of the year with fund balance. So while we don't necessarily budget for it to pay that, because we'd be basically raising more taxes in the district to pay the food service budget, we use existing funds that have already been raised or accumulated over the years from our fund balance, our undesignated fund balance, in order to do that. So fund balance is at the end of the year.
And I guess, Scott, just to explain that, though how it's treated is a separate line item altogether, because the cost of the food service workers and the admin and all of that, how that is treated is not in this budget, and it's supposed
Correct.
to, the cost that we charge for the food or anything like that is supposed to cover itself, unlike some districts where it's more in the budget. Is that correct?
Well, some districts will pay their director out of the budget if they're trying to, you know, basically make up differences for overages in the budget. But no, the food service program is its own separate enterprise fund. And in good times, that actually sustained its own cost. And then when the new regulations came into effect, food costs went through the roof. And also, you know, districts weren't able to be as creative in their a la carte programs. then people started seeing basically a deficit. Most districts experience a very significant deficit to their programs. We have chosen here not to carry a line in the budget for that deficit. We've chosen to take any reserve funds or any fund balance at the end of the year to offset that deficit. So, but all of those costs are in its own account section and, are accounted for separately, Jennifer.
Okay. And it's probably, it would probably be prudent for you just to speak about how the current year is, even though, in the media, it, is portrayed that all of food service is covered by federal funds, but that's not really where the case is, because we have the cost of workers and things like that, and where you expect we may end up.
Correct. Right now, in talking to John Carlson, we're expecting about a $200,000 deficit. There is some additional subsidies that are coming in this year that have helped offset that. But again, when you don't have right now what we're doing is serving basically bag lunches or minor lunches, we aren't able to run the robust a la carte programs at the middle school and the high school that we normally would, that basically increase student participation and provide significant revenue to the district. So that's why we'll be running that deficit this year. Several years ago, what we did, and we didn't have the opportunity to see it through, is we had eliminated one cafeteria at the high school that was going and didn't require as much staff, didn't require as much food service cost, because we were running two separate cafeterias at the high school. So by eliminating that additional cafeteria, we had hoped to come much closer to breaking even, but that hasn't been the case due to a pandemic. The lack of being able to be more creative with what we're doing in our a la carte programs. We are hoping very much next year, when we're back, that we're able to become more creative in the a la carte programs and generate more revenue for the food service program.
Thank you, Scott. I think there's a lot of positive out in the community about what the food service is doing this year.
Yeah,
even if it's
absolutely.
bag lunch, it's been going over very well, and I know they're and I think people can understand us picking up that extra money that needs to be there.
Yeah, I would say that our food service employees are fantastic. John Carlson has worked very, very well along with Molly, who's our assistant food service director. And I admire what our food service staff have done this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Les.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Just to second that, commending work of the service staff. I know all the students in the high school are really loving taking advantage of it's as simple as just filling out a survey in the morning to get a quality, nutritious lunch and free breakfast for that day. So I think that's just a cost that obviously hits, but its importance can't be understated. And I think everyone is very appreciative for the district for doing such an unprecedented year.
Great. And as I said, we are getting additional subsidies this year for the food, but it basically, we still can't cover all our labor costs and food costs. Okay, great. So let's continue on to maintenance of buildings, and we'll find here that as I mentioned earlier, we have on line 1010. We have some additional funds here. We have staff salary increases, but we also have some overtime here in facilities around snow removal and some of the other areas that we're having to deal with across the district right now. And so I'm anticipating that some of that's going to carry over into next year. And pretty much everything else in facilities is flat. Other than that area, we have the energy lease, which we did on the district, years back, which was installing heat pumps, the lighting upgrades, the energy upgrades that we did across the district. Again, this is just adjusting the decrease there for the decreasing basically lease cost on that. It's a little lopsided because we do apply for one of them is an energy lease, which has a federal reimbursement to it. And so we have to account for that reimbursement against the interest that we pay. Tax
Scott,
exempt
can I ask a
energy
quick-
bond.
I have a quick question, a couple
Yes.
lines above, where the line 1025, pandemic supplies.
Yes.
There's a typo in equipment, not important for the budget, but I just noticed it. Those
not
numbers,
And we're a school district and I can't spell. Okay.
I can't spell anything, so no big deal on that, but I just noticed it while I was reading it.
Yeah, thank
The
you.
numbers are exactly the same. Are we anticipating any difference in that supplies and equipment line?
Well, we've also budgeted, if you remember, Jeff had mentioned that we budgeted in the ESSER funds that we're also reserving some money there as well for some of the supplies and equipment. So we're keeping this the same. And, we had originally budgeted in this year the $30,936, but we were able to cover most of it right out of the, almost $3 million in federal funds that we received. Most of what we did around the district, and these pandemic supplies were part of that. The state is also supplying a lot of the items, so masks, gloves, some of the sanitizers. We're still able to get that from the state right now. Hopefully, some of that will continue next year as well. But but we've got this, plus we've got the other amount that we've included into the ESSER funds.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a quick question too, Scott.
Yeah.
What line or what number is snow removal in?
Snow removal salaries is up here, but
Okay.
we work with the town of Cumberland, so
Yep.
we provide services, cleaning services to the town of Cumberland, and a number of other services. And in return, they actually do, while we do some plowing, they do a lot of the snow removal on our campus.
Okay.
So we have an agreement with the town of Cumberland, and it's actually been it's been mutually very beneficial to both of us.
Okay. And the equipment line, 1024, was that like the Bobcat we purchased for snow removal? Am I remembering that correctly? Or is that
1024? No, that's the equipment line there is actually 0.
Yeah, I know for the previous year, and I was just wondering if that has lowered our. I know there was talk when we purchased that it would be lowering our snow removal costs.
Actually, it did help, because what it did was save on some of the labor costs in some of the custodial areas, because we were able to get up on the sidewalks, and rather than running individual snow blowers, we were actually able to get on the sidewalks, sweep the sidewalks, and actually use the piece of equipment to do the sidewalks. So that's had a benefit not just for snow removal, but many projects around the district.
Awesome. I always like to see the money we spend when it comes back to us in savings.
Yeah, no, that's been a great purchase. And actually, out of this year, we're actually having to purchase a new tractor because the other one died. And with it, we've purchased an aerating unit and a infield tool for doing the infield on the ball field. So we should be able to also work there. That should save us money in the long run too, because we won't even have to subcontract some of that. All right. Any other questions on facilities or on maintenance? Okay. So we'll just continue down past the lease on the energy, and we'll get down to transportation. So transportation, we've got about a 3% increase there, but also, just so everybody's aware, we have kept some additional salaries in this $693,000 number. I don't know what transportation will look like from the start of the year or in next fiscal year. Are we going to have to run double bus runs? Am I going to have to run some extra bus runs? What's the configuration going to look like for that next year? Currently, we can only put one student per seat on every bus. So it really eliminates, by the CDC guidelines, it really limits how many students we can transport on a bus right now. So if those same guidelines are in place next year, again, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but we do have some additional funds, which we budgeted in the current year, which we're also carrying forward into the next year to help with that. So then we get down to on line 1038, you'll see the 160,000 there. That's for the lease on the bus garage with the town of Cumberland. And then the portable lease is a negative number, right? Because that moved over to the middle school. So it's come out of transportation and moved over to the middle school. Fleet insurance, we've added buses. We've added 2 buses this year. We've added 2 vans this year that were purchased with the CRF funds. So we use those to purchase 2 brand new vans. So we have some additional insurance costs as well as insurance increases. The bus purchase line, here's another place where the Finance Committee and the board had positioned themselves. We actually paid off a bus lease early in order to come into this next fiscal year. So we aren't seeing any increase in our bus purchase line. I do have 1 additional bus budgeted for next year, but even with that additional budget, we're down $33,000. So we'll still get another bus next year. We've bought 2 out of this year, and I'm hoping that I'm going to get state approval or state funding on a 3rd bus in this fiscal year if we can pull it off. And those, if they are state approved, we get state subsidy for them in the following year, so long as we make a payment out of this fiscal year. Again, these down through here are just areas of transportation like special needs students. There's areas that are we try to benefit ourselves state subsidy wise by accounting for costs related directly to special needs transportation. There's then the, oh, sorry, that probably bothered everybody's eyes. Bear with me for a minute, please. We also have transportation, there it is for the special needs. We also have transportation for vocational students, so that's going to paths. We try to share with Falmouth at times, and Falmouth shares with us when we can for driving to paths. And then the other thing we have is homeless student transportation. We had some costs that we experienced beginning of the year, but I believe this number is a number that we could possibly adjust down, this $5,500. I think that's a little high for this year, so we'll be looking to reduce that as well. And those are the students that are homeless, might live in another town that we have to transport here to our district, or transport from our district to another district. Again, Jennifer, you had mentioned food service. As you can see, this is the contribution that we made to food service, the expenditure, and we did that from fund balance in the previous fiscal year. The district's debt service on line 1075, principal is decreased along with interest for a total decrease of $81,762, and that's the net of our decrease in debt service. We hit the plateau and the peak with the GCA, and things are now coming down. All of our debt service is declining at this point. So the final line is the utilities on the central office on the little red building. So as you can see, water, sewer, gas, the only increase that I've had to look at is the natural gas, which is a budget to actual. After all of that, you are now, as you have always been, experts in school budget 101 with a budget of $41,846,284, or a 3.96% increase, or roughly 1.6 million. Okay, so that's where we end up. And again, that 3.96 throws off roughly 1% on taxes in Cumberland and under 1% in North Yarmouth. So that's where we end up. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. That is the district's budget.
As people are queuing up questions, if I could, again, Scott, thank you for going through this. Thank you for going through this many, many times, because this does so many things as we go through this. When people look at the district and it seems like it's just one thing or one bill, and the ability to go line by line, building by building, roll by roll, it makes it so much easier for people to understand those moving parts. Again, just to reiterate that process that you and Jeff led the committee through this year, that prioritization piece. everybody wants something, and you did a wonderful job of distilling that down to the most important pieces. And I think this jumped out at all of us is the impact of the roles that you are looking to fund. And then the most important thing to me and maybe others on the group, the impact on teaching and learning, which is why we're in these board positions. So again, thank you for your work on this, Jeff. Thank you for your work as well.
Okay. That's where we're at.
So I'll open it up for any discussion. I know, Jeff, you had a few things you wanted to discuss as well. Did you want to go first before we kind of send it around for any sort of questions or discussion?
If you want me to, if that makes sense, I can just throw out a couple of things. We've talked about ESSER money a lot with regards to this budget, and as you know, we've already talked about the $178,000 in the SR2 funds, which will be funding the additional school nurse for the next 2 years. Plus, it will be paying for some COVID-related PPE for next year going into the new school year. Even though I expect that we will be in green, we will still be needing certain personal protective equipment for some of our staff that work with populations of our students, our nurses, etc. We'll still need that equipment. So we have some money in there. We also have some money in the SR2 funds to continue offsetting some daytime cleaning that we've been doing in the common areas. And I think, again, going into the next school year, we're going to still have a need for that as we're working our way out of the pandemic. In the SR3 funds, we haven't had a process for really discussing this, and this will be down the road, obviously. We haven't even received our allocation, but as you know, we'll be receiving about $393,000, just over that, in the SR3 funds. Again, we haven't gotten receipt of that, but that's what we're anticipating at this point. And I think it's fair to say that, with some of that money, we're certainly looking at some of the unfunded positions that did not make it into the budget that are still COVID related, that also will provide a boost to our students next year. For example, one position that we did not get into the budget, but I think would be very important to consider for the ESSER 3 funds, and I'll obviously be bringing all this to the Finance Committee at some point, would be the halftime math specialist at grades 4 and 5. That's been a request for a number of years, at least 2 years now, that that request has come in for a part-time or a halftime math specialist, in addition to the math specialists that we have at the elementary level. I think going out of the pandemic next year, as we're beefing up our RTI program again, we had a very robust RTI program this year. We've continued it, but it hasn't been as robust, just because we haven't had the staffing levels that we typically have. So that might be a position that we consider for ESSER 3, for example. And that includes after-school programming for increasing that, because the ESSER 3 funds can be used for things like that. Andy had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting additional technology position, and I appreciate hearing directly from staff who are in these roles in their perspectives. As the Finance Committee knows, that's a position that has been tossed around quite a bit over the last, at least the last month. As we're talking about priorities, we have a lot of technology. It's a position that I weighed heavily, kind of put it back and forth. Where we landed with the technology position is we did not include it in the proposed budget. Instead, we included a help ticketing system to help manage all of the requests that come into the department. And we've actually purchased that, looking to purchase that out of the current year, so that we're not waiting until next year to streamline some of those requests. So I think that will be something that will be helpful. The other piece is that we'll be freeing up one of our technology department members who's currently working a lot on vendor, student privacy and vendors. And that's all now being streamlined through a consortium that we're part of, and getting those vendors and the student privacy part taken care of centrally, and not, or I should say regionally, and not just trying to do that piecemeal every time we have a vendor and student privacy. There's federal laws around student privacy, and we have to meet those obligations, and it does take a lot of our staff time in the tech department. That being said, I think it's still, whether it's this budget year or next, I think that the additional technology support position is one that I have really weighed in my mind, and it did not make it through the budget process at this point. But as we've continued looking and fine-tuning the budget, and as I've continued looking at the devices we've got, the work ahead, the art center becoming more active in September again, and the fact that we don't have a manager up there, our long-term plan had been to have the technology department take over the technology in the art center. So, without additional staff, that is going to be challenging to do. So I think, I guess I'm signaling at this point, if we don't include this position this year, it's certainly a position that will be high on the list for the next fiscal year going forward. So the tech position, the halftime math specialist, these are all positions that have been kind of didn't quite make the cut, but we have really been worried about these positions from the beginning, and just want to get them on your radar if there's a different way. And finally, we've talked about the reconfigurations in the district office to include an assistant director without actually increasing the budget. As we continue to navigate the transition to getting to green, and as I continue thinking about the looming new building project, and all the work that is falling on the district office right now in many different ways, I am still very concerned about the work level and the staffing levels that we've got available to us in the district office. And it's something that I would like to, run by the finance committee, sooner than later. And then, if there's an agreement with the finance committee, bring something forward as an adjustment to the budget later in the process. As you know, we usually will bring a final adjustment after it's gone through the finance committee forward to the board if there are any adjustments, usually just as the board is looking to adopt the budget. And that's been, kind of my, the way I've handled that each year, and, given the finance committee a heads up and process it through. So that might be something that I'd still like to bring forward. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think another finance committee meeting, Kevin, might be in order. As we know, the budget is fluid, and we continue to, work through some things until the board finally adopts it. You've got the budget as it stands. There is a long period of time between when I present it, the board adopts it, and the final process in the budget, and we continue to gather more information and usually do make a few adjustments at the very end of the process. So these are things that I'd like to discuss a little bit more with the finance committee, and then see if we want to bring anything forward, if they want to bring anything forward as an adjustment to the budget.
Thank you, Jeff. Kevin, or I open it up for discussion and questions. Now's the time. This is our workshop time. So,
yeah, I've got a question on not really a comment on what Jeff said. I know Scott in his presentation, it looks like there's $30,000 or $40,000 that might be
reallocated, or maybe other stuff that could be reallocated to some of Jeff's things. What I really don't want to see is a repeat, and I can't remember now if it was a year ago or 2 years ago, where we came up with a savings, and it may have been in health insurance or something. And, after we had pretty much published to the towns and everything that this is what the increase was going to be, and then those particular savings we tax stuff back on, and the optics weren't good on that, and I hope we don't repeat that again. I mean, I think for reasons semi beyond our control, that as good as a job as Scott and the finance committee did on this, I think there are external things that are out there that are not going to make this as easy a budget passed as could have been. So I just think as we do these adjustments, we just need to be careful of the optics.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Peter completely. That's why when we got the health savings, or the health, not savings, but we adjusted our health insurance based on the highest amount that that we're going to be getting for an increase. As Scott mentioned, we were able to remove that from the budget. So that wasn't something that we just took it out completely when we got the highest amount. And it could even be down from, I think what is it, Scott? 4.2% is the highest that we'll get for an increase, and it could be lower than that. So we did adjust the budget downward when we got that information last week, and removed it, which brought obviously the expenditure side down, and then the tax impact down as well. I agree with you, Peter. I think if there's any adjustments, this late in the game, I think we're trying to do that within the amount that we've already put out, if we can do it. If there's an opportunity to use Sr3 funds, I think those are things that I'd like to discuss as well. I think the finance committee is also going to have to talk about the Sr3 budget. Again, there's just under $400,000 that we're expecting, and we'll certainly need to put a proposed budget together and discuss it further with the finance committee and with the board as to how we want to use those funds. And I think, just based on the fact that, again, it's COVID related, we'll be looking at some positions that we think might enhance the teaching and learning going into the new school year being in green. Well, I don't disagree with you, Peter. I think that was why we wanted to be transparent when we received that insurance amount. We went ahead and removed it from the budget.
Mike Williams.
Thanks. And just again, kudos, Scott, Jeff, Kevin, Finance Committee. This is my first budget go around, so I don't have in-depth comments because they would not be very intelligent. So learning on the go here, but this is really impressive work. I don't have specific questions, just wanted to note, so I generally agree with what Peter was saying, that Scott, you mentioned that, in looking at this line by line again, you notice there may be 37K. This year, it seems like the time to then just say, let's drop the number down a bit and put it back into it rather than finding other ways to spend it. I feel like that's a prudent way to go about it this year, given everything around it. That's the only thing I wanted to add. But again, thank you. This is really good work.
Anyone else have questions or comments?
I'd just like to add, I'd like to thank both of the towns. They always work well with us, and trying to set a tax amount. I mean, I think we're going to be one of the lowest tax impacts that I can think of in Southern Maine. Again, we've been in this position before. I think a couple of years ago we were, the lowest in the region, and I think we could be on the way to being one of the lowest, if not the lowest again, in terms of tax impact on our 2 towns. So, and at the same time, being able to place a lot of important positions into the budget that are instructional. I mean, the vast majority of the new positions we put in were enrollment related or instructional or both. And so this budget really puts the money where it needs to be in the classroom, knowing that we're getting out of a pandemic, and that we'll be in a more typical school year in September, and that we want to be able to support students as much as we can. So there's a heavy emphasis on academics in this budget. At the same time, we're bringing in a low tax impact. And I thank the towns for helping us with that. And, the growth in both towns always contributes to that, as well as, the state aid that we received. Receiving a lot more state aid again this year is very helpful in our district. Part of that is that we're a growing school district. We get more money for having more students and for being, a healthy and growing school district. So I think that always helps. So I think we're positioned very well with this budget. I would say if I was a parent in this district, I would be absolutely voting for this budget because it provides, the academic piece that is absolutely needed going into a more typical year after 18 months of a pandemic.
Thank you, Jeff. I saw Anne raise her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of echo what Peter and Mike were saying about, if we are able to find any other reductions, not to try and use that to add on any of those other things that the district does need, and hopefully, we can find funds through Sr3 to do that. It's always hard. You don't want to have to take money from somewhere else later then to pay for it. I feel like it's a shell game in so many different ways, but given everything with the pandemic and where people are at, any way that we can bring down what the tax impact would be, I think would be really good. I also just wanted to make a note, especially since now we used COVID funds to purchase even more technology that we're going to have to maintain moving forward. If there's any way that as a district we can just try and think of how we can reduce technology costs overall, and even if that means, like Maple I. Wilson, do kindergartners need to be on a device? I know other districts start at first grade. Just any way, because I foresee technology just eating up so much more of our budget, and I don't want that to have to take away from instructional teacher and other, tangible supplies in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Kate, and then Marco, or unless Scott, are you responding to Anne? Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, what I wanted to say is those technology lines, we need to spend a little bit more time with Dirk looking into those and just making sure that there's no duplication or no additional costs. So we will be spending some time in those, Ann. And as you noticed, our technology hardware lines are way down because of how we've positioned ourselves. So I think we're making some strides in that area, but we will review all those lines again.
Go ahead, Kate.
I agree with Peter and Anne and Mike Williams that this budget, it's great. And I don't think that given the global economic climate that we're in, that now would be the time to say, hey, we got to under 4, let's, add this and this. I fully agree that this is a budget that is super responsible, but it's also very responsive. It's added some staff in after trying to reduce those positions. We were finding it wasn't working for students. It wasn't working for other teachers. So I'm happy to see that there's been new additions. And what I see is that this is a budget for a school district that is ready to reopen fully, and it's ready to be responsive to student needs when we know that we're going to have significant student needs after, a very long time of not being in school full time. So I am getting concerned. I see a few things, or I hear a few things in my community. Some parents that are unhappy with their students only being in school 2 days a week, saying, I'm going to take this out and vote no on the budget. And I just hope that people can hear that this is a budget that is ready to meet student needs. This is a budget that's ready to be an open school. And the worst thing that I could ever imagine this summer is us having to spend the entire summer reinventing a budget when we want to spend the entire summer making sure that we are 100% ready to be open. So that's my soapbox for the night. But I hope that people in the community can hear that we want to spend our summer getting ready, not backtracking for a new budget.
100% agree, Kate. Thank you so much. Jeff, are you responding to Kate, or should I go on to Margot? Okay, Margot.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback off of Kate because I agree 100% with what she just said, but I'd like to also add this piece as well for just to help parents make that decision as to whether or not they can support the district budget. I have never seen a district budget, and maybe I'm sure others have, but I haven't, when it has failed, actually go up. It always goes down. And if it goes down, the academic support positions that we have added in and made this work for this year will surely be impacted, because that's really what we've put in. Those are the new positions. So a failed budget means that we will not be providing the supports, unfortunately. I've never seen a budget go the other way. People don't put more money in, they put less money in. And so that would be a huge risk on the community to have a failed budget. And I understand people's frustrations with the hybrid model. I understand the frustrations with the pandemic, but voting no on the budget isn't going to help that. It's going to make it much worse. And I would absolutely support what Kate just said.
Thank you, Jeff. Margot?
I too would support what Kate said. I think you're much more clearly thinking about the big picture than I am right now, and I appreciate what you said. I share Jeff's concern with the central office reduction position, and also just want to put out there that the central office people all do a lot of things, not just their given title. So I think it is important that we keep that on the board's radar, because it's a very well run office, but the people that are there do a lot of, they're having more asked of them each time a position is taken out. And there's a finite amount that you can ask of people. So I think we just need to keep an eye on that.
Thank you,
I
Margot.
would just say one more thing to go on top of what Kate said. And the thing is that we have put together a responsible budget to run the district. And any vote of the community would be a protest on the hybrid and the school thing. It would not be a protest on the reasonableness of the budget. So I will say categorically right now, if that budget is turned down, the next damn day, the same amount is going to go back to the voters, because as a school board, we're responsible for setting a budget to operate. And the thing is, there will not be a vote against the budget itself. It's just going to be their way of protesting, and let them have their protest, but I'll be the first one to put the same damn amount right back in.
Thank you, Peter. Margot, did you just raise your hand again? Oh, okay. I just saw it go back up. I just wanted to say a few things. And again, Kevin, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to share, if anybody else wanted to say anything. By no means do I have to go back.
I like that I don't have to guess where Peter is, so, or anybody else on the call. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, we worked hard to have a responsible budget. We worked hard to understand the district, the needs in each building, the needs for each student, the needs for families, to try to do the right thing in a really, really challenging year. And so I would echo each of my colleagues on the call. It is responsible. And I understand people vote for a number of different reasons, but it's tough to do better than this, though we will continue to strive to be better in everything that we do. So if the community has questions after watching this or has questions after any of our meetings, I would strongly encourage them to reach out to any of us, and we'll try to provide the best information and insight possible to help you make an informed decision for something that is so important to each of us and each of our families. So again, thank you, everybody, for your comments. Spot on.
Thank you, Kevin. I think Kate was the one that said responsive, and I think that is a great word for this, responsible and responsive. You're right, Kate, that we did look back to some positions that we realized we needed to respond to differently, and I appreciated your comment about that. I also wanted to send some gratitude to some previous finance committees for being so great in planning for all of the debt services and leases that we have paid off. I have heard about that. I've been, here for 4 years, and I've heard a lot of it, but now I'm seeing it actually come into play, and it feels really great to see that in action. So thank you to all of you that have worked on these budgets previous years, because it's playing out now. And I think, we all have said it, that the conversations about getting back to school in any way, shape, or form that we would like to see go hand in hand with passing this budget. And I hope that people see that these are connected and that they are 100% related to in-person, real-time support for students and staff. So I am grateful for Scott. Thank you for taking us through this. It makes a budget feel like we can wrap our heads around it, even though we don't do this for a career in the ways that you have. So thank you. This is a big thing to take on line by line, especially remotely, but it's only 8:30, so we're doing okay. I don't see anybody else with questions or hands raised. So I don't believe there's any other comments related to the workshop. So I'm going to say thank you again to everybody, and then ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a second. Oh, do I have to do, yes, at the vote. In a second?
Second.
Okay, and then I will do roll call for the vote. Peter Bingham?
Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Ann Maximovich?
Yes.
Kyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin?
Yes.
Mike Simmons?
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
Elias Leggett Barr?
Yes.
And I don't believe